Do you ever drive other people's vehicles very often? Or are you the type of person that got in a major claim, major accident, DUI, whatever the case is, and the state requires you to have what's called an SR22? It's basically a filing just like you would do your taxes, but you now have to prove that you have insurance. Problem is you don't have a vehicle, so how do you prove that you have insurance because the state's mandating it? If you are in these situations where you need insurance but you don't have a policy or a vehicle, we're going to go over the 5 pieces that a non-owner's policy is going to cover on your policy. Also, let's start by talking about what we just mentioned, the people that would need it. If you are the type of person that rents vehicles often, you're probably going to want a non-owner's policy, maybe. That liability will carry you across different states and different places in the United States. In this scenario, let's say you are driving for Uber or Lyft or some sort of organization and you need more liability insurance. Let's say they don't offer enough coverage. You can purchase the non-owner's policy to give you that higher coverage that you want to be protected for. The other case is where you're renting a lot of vehicles constantly. So if you're on business trips and driving and that liability insurance, you just don't want to keep paying that high premium. You can get that non-owner's policy to cover you for driving other people's vehicles. Essentially, it's taking you, insuring your liability in a vehicle that you drive. You don't have to list the vehicle that you're driving. It's just covering you in general for any liability portions that you may cause. The first piece that it's going to cover is bodily injury. If you injure somebody in an accident, you're going to pick the level of coverage you want to have. In most cases, you're either 100, 300, or 250, 500, and you can go higher. That means 250,000 per person if you were to hurt someone, 500,000 per accident if there were multiple people in the car. The second piece is damage to other people's vehicles. So if you damage a nice vehicle, you're going to pick a property damage limit. Most commonly, 50 or 100,000 are the two that you're going to pick. I recommend the 100,000 just because the cost is not expensive. And there's a lot of vehicles that are worth more than $50,000. If you damage a car that's $58,000, then you owe $8,000 out of pocket for that claim. The third piece is to protect yourself from legal lawsuit in what we just mentioned. If you want to have more coverage than you're getting from a specific location, or if you think you're going to drive somebody's car on a trip or a vacation, or just constantly. If they have lower limits of liability and they don't want to put you on their policy, you may want to have that additional coverage to protect yourself. You may need the vehicle and you're grateful for them, but the problem is they may not carry the same limits that you would want to carry. In this situation, you would just get that non-owner's policy to cover you in case something did happen. The fourth and fifth are pretty much tied together. It's the uninsured and underinsured motorist coverage. If somebody hits you that has no insurance or has less insurance than you, then you are protecting your own medical for bodily injury. In case somebody in your vehicle got injured, you want to make sure that you're taken care of. If it's a hit and run, that's an uninsured motorist. There's no one to go after, so now you're just stuck. If you have a policy, a non-owner's policy, that has that same liability limit of uninsured motorist, let's say that 250 and 500,000, then you've got 250,000 per person up to 500,000 per accident in the vehicle that you're driving. And the last, which is the actual fifth piece, is medical payments. Very similar. You can do that instead, but they're typically smaller limits. So you usually have about 5,000 or 10,000. Doesn't normally go over 50,000 worth of medical. That way, if you or anyone in your vehicle got hurt, then you have some sort of medical coverage just to help you get through that bump that you have currently. Now, there's also 5 pieces that you should know that aren't covered on this type of policy. Damage to the vehicle that you're driving. They don't offer comprehensive and collision on a non-owner's policy. If you're going to drive that person's car and they don't have full coverage on it, then that car isn't covered. You can't add it. They just don't have that option because you don't have a legal liability or a legal tie to that vehicle. So that insurance won't pay you per vehicle that you're driving, especially since this is kind of a general blanket policy for you. In that case, they can't tell what car you're driving or the value of that car, so there's not a way to quantify that in a cost. If you don't pick the medical payments and you do get injured, this is the second piece that you're not covered for. You don't have medical coverage in a non-owner's insurance policy. Honestly, most people don't take it, and it's a shame if they get hurt, but it's a very uncommon situation. So in this situation, you just wouldn't be covered if you got any type of injury. If it was your fault, that liability goes for the other people, but not for you. In that case, the MedPay will kick in and pay for those injuries that you have. The third part that's not covered is if you aren't the driver. you can't put them on your policy just randomly. So if you are driving down a road and you get tired and you hand the keys to someone else, they're not covered on that non-owner's policy. That non-owner's policy is just for you. The fourth non-covered piece is business use. Even though this is a reason some people purchase the policy, most of the time, and read the fine print or ask the agent, is business use included? Because business use is usually excluded on that policy, mainly because they want you to buy some sort of a commercial policy. There's a completely different scenario in that case, which they might want you to go down, but if they offer it, then great. You have that option if it's available. And the fifth and final piece that is not covered is your personal belongings. The laptop, your socks, your couch if you shoved it in the door somehow, whatever that case is, that is not covered on car insurance. And in 90% of the cases in most insurances in the US, isn't covered in anyone's policy. That's usually an additional piece, a rider that you can add to your auto policy, but it's mostly covered on home insurance. So if you have a renter's insurance policy or a homeowner's insurance policy, your belongings are covered outside of your home. And that's where it kicks in the car insurance. So if you're purchasing the non-owner's policy, then just know that your personal items aren't covered under that policy unless it's specifically included and stated on your declarations page. So how much is a non-owner's policy and where do I get one? Essentially, almost every company does them. I'll list the companies in the description below that are pretty common for non-owners insurance policies. And cost is about half of the cost of car insurance. Just remember, you're not covering a vehicle, so there's a low risk there, and you're just covering the liability. I can't give you an exact number, mainly because we don't know your driving history, your insurance score, all of that types of pieces that make up an insurance policy. Now, if you're not sure what coverages you need to carry, I'm going to put my Insurance 101 video for car insurance that will go over that more in depth and detail. Go ahead and check it out. Otherwise, I'm Mark with Think Insurance. I'll see you in the next one.